Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the eDiscovery channel. Tom O'Connor here. Really happy to have Daniel Gold with me. And I should have confirmed your title, Daniel. You're the Principal eDiscovery Managed Services Leader at BDO. Is that right?
That's correct.
All
Yes.
right. Oh, man, I love it when
Well done, Tom. Well done.
I'm right. Winging it as always.
We're,
Got my
we're, we're off to a good start so
got
far.
my cliff notes over here on the side, right?
It's good.
So listen, Daniel, you do a great. I don't know. It's not a blog. It's a newsletter. Is it the gold standard leadership?
Yeah.
The,
So something I was really passionate about because I've gone through enough companies where I know what bad leadership looks like, and so I wanted to. I feel like I'm at that age now in my life where I can start espousing what I think good leadership looks like,
right.
and start giving back to the community, whether it's the legal vertical or otherwise. So I created this thing called the Gold Standard Leadership Lab. And the Leadership Lab is basically, it is both, it's a newsletter, but it's also an audio podcast and it's also video. So people
Okay.
can
Right. So
find
I
me.
get the newsletter. I get a
You
feed
get the
into my
newsletter,
into my
right?
mailbox. Right.
So
And
when
you
you get
you
that,
had one couple. I think a couple weeks ago now about prioritizing people over strategy.
that's right.
And you were really talking about how, and it's something that's close to me because I've talked for years about. One of the things I used to say in the old days was, you know, computers are fast and people are slow, but people are the smart ones and computers are dumb. They just do what we tell them to do, right? They're just very, very fast at that. And then I kind of morphed that into, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago when we started talking about AI. I said, let's not forget to keep the attorney in AI. Um, you
That's
know,
right. That's right.
the people thing is just so important. So just expound on that a little because I think it's something that people need to hear, and I'll say why in a second after you say your piece.
So there's a couple pieces of this, and I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to expand on this. So it doesn't matter how great your strategy is. It doesn't matter how laborious how long you have spent in creating objectives and key results for your organization, for your team. What matters is your team. Period. Hard stop. It is always going to be the team that is going to be able to execute whatever strategy you come up with. But here's the thing. If the person that you are communicating with on your team does not believe in what you are saying because you cannot communicate it in a way in which they believe that what you believe in, it is never going to get executed. The key to being able to execute an appropriate strategy, regardless if it's the legal technology or any other vertical, it doesn't matter what it is, people have to believe in what you believe in, right? They have to believe that because if they don't believe in what you believe in, they're never going to execute against the strategy, and you're going to blame it on the team, and then you're going to do riffs, you're going to do layoffs, etc. Oh, the team doesn't listen, the team can't follow along, the team doesn't understand. If you've hired these individuals, or your team has hired individuals to work for you, to work
Right.
for the company, it means that they had and possess a certain level of characteristics and qualities and intelligence to be able to perform the functions in which you want them to do. But you never would have hired them if you didn't already believe that there was some sort of alignment between what they believe and what your organization believes. So the key to being able to execute is being able to be a human being as a leader. And that is the only way.
And it's funny because when we were first talking about this, I mentioned Greg, I'm a Notre Dame football fan. I'm the black sheep of my family. I'm literally the only one of my brothers, sisters, and cousins who did not go to Notre Dame. um, my brother was actually a walk on at Notre Dame. He was a Rudy years ago.
He's a Rudy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, true story under Coach Parsegian. Um,
Wow.
um, but the current coach, Marcus Freeman, who's a great guy, I think, and a great coach. My dad was a high school coach, so I kind of
Hmm.
relate to people who have that attitude towards people. He was asked what was the key to his success at Notre Dame, and he said, "Well, uh, find the right people, then train the right people, and then develop the right culture, which of course is all
Yes.
the people working together."
Yes.
And it's funny that all three things he said were focused around people, not technique, not
Right.
speed in the 40-yard dash, you know, not how far they can throw the ball. It was all about the people and
Well,
getting
think
them.
think about what you just said though with the football analogy, right? All that thing, all that stuff you just said, that was table stakes for being placed onto the team. Those are table stakes, right?
Yep.
Everything else, right? Everything else is about how you develop and nurture and operate day to day. That's the biggest difference. And so if you can't foster and cultivate a culture where everybody helps one another, then it doesn't matter how far you can throw the ball. It doesn't matter how great you can kick the ball, because if you can't play the team correctly,
Yeah,
you're never
it
you're
all
never going to
goes.
win. Right.
So the question that I had that really triggered in my mind, and I'm sorry to be somewhat abrupt here. We wasted too much time talking before we turned the recording on.
The pre-show was fantastic.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the NFL, right?
Yeah, right.
The game with Pat Mack and Nick Saban. Anyways, um, parlay that, if you will, progress that into AI,
Mhm.
because that's the biggest thing that's going on in our business right now. Which is, if ever there's a trust the technology, listen to the hype about the technology. It's what's going on with AI. Nobody talks about how to use it or how it works or how you're going to implement it. It's almost like the easy button, the magic.
Yeah,
Just trust me. We got AI, man. Um,
yeah.
and so, what are you seeing in your practice? Because you've worked a lot with M365 and Purview and implementing all of that. I mean, how's that playing out? And I'm sorry, what I mentioned earlier was what I get phone calls about is, where's my resource? Where do I go to learn about this stuff, especially in the Microsoft world, especially in the Purview M365 world? They're changing stuff. I don't know what's going on. Where do I go to learn about this? Are the people getting left out? Um, are they an afterthought, or is it just we're still playing catch up because that's all changed so fast?
There's a lot to unpack with that question. There's a lot to unpack. So let me start from the beginning. So with attorneys, as you know, Tom, we have always been. So I speak. I was a practicing lawyer over 20 years ago.
Yep.
So we've always been laggards when it comes to technology adoption.
Yeah.
So, if I take all of your listeners back to 2009, 2010, and 11, 12, et cetera, we had this thing called predictive coding, computer assisted review, and literally everyone said this was going to take over first level document review, right? Everybody said that this is going to be the thing that replaces the attorneys. And there was, our friend Tom Grix was in the Wall Street Journal with the Landau decision out of Virginia. And it was, the Wall Street Journal article said, our attorneys, excuse me, our robots taking over the attorneys' jobs.
Right. Right.
Now we know that didn't happen. Now, it's important distinction between the technology assisted review, TAR and CAL days versus now with AI. What's the difference? The difference is that everybody started talking about algorithms and richness, right? And f-stops and n-grams if you want to get really geeky, right? Nobody knows what that means, and nobody wants to know what that means if you're an attorney, right? And you go to an attorney who's billing out $1,000 an hour and say you have to sit with the data scientist to code this, to create a sample set before feeding it over to the machine, for then it to iterate. No. And then you have to have the right case because it needs whatever.
Yeah.
Everybody knows the story, right?
Yeah.
So now think about the difference now. And I have the among the different podcasts that I run, one of them is the BDO Legal Tech Talk podcast. And of all of the guests that we've had on the program, the one question I always like to ask, and it's so fascinating to know the answer, is that why is it that we've always been laggards as attorneys? Why is it that we're now on the other end, right? We're so fast to
Yeah.
adopt
What has
AI.
happened? You're right. Why are we now all of a sudden there's a land rush?
Right. And we have blinders on, and we're not reading terms of conditions as attorneys, and we're just going in blindly. And so the answer is interesting. We're all talking about it around the dinner table, our partners, our spouses, our kids. Everybody's talking about the AI, that ChatGPT does this. I did it for a homework assignment. I did it for this thing. I did it
Good
for that
point.
thing. Right. So it's available, it's ubiquitous, and there's literally no barrier of entry because we've been trained as humans by Google, or for instance, how to be able to type things into a search box. And nobody appreciates the nuances other than, geeks like us and others that are listening to your podcast right now, where we talk about the fact that a lot of this all came from the 1950s, artificial intelligence, and everything from the 1950s all the way up to the present day led to the present day. So all of that research led to the present day to be able to talk about things like natural language interfaces, right? And be able to query indexing. All of this great algorithms all came up with a nice, beautiful, simple interface called ChatGPT right out of the box, and just type something in and be able to do it. And everybody talks about it. So if everybody talks about it, Tom, There's no
Yeah.
barrier to entry, and you could just type things in and do it. So nobody thinks, oh, I need to verify to make sure that this thing called AI, right? This black box that I really actually don't know what the large
Anything about.
language
Yeah.
model, right? Any
Yeah.
models learned on, that I can't just copy and paste a citation that looks to be accurate. And that was the beginning of an avalanche of today. Presently, there's a website, Tom, which is really incredible. We can put it in your show notes, where there is someone who has put together a repository of every single fabricated, hallucinated case where an
Oh yeah.
attorney has
Doug
gotten in
Austin
trouble.
talks about that all the time. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
300. So today is
Hundreds now, right?
yeah. So we're recording November 4th. As of November 4th, there are 340. 340. So after Metaverse Avianca, I thought, hey, no one's going to do this anymore.
Yeah.
That was
Everybody
the
will
case.
fair
That was the
warning,
case,
right? Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So for those listening that don't know, that case was the case where the attorneys copy and pasted fabricated hallucinated cases. That's what it's called when AI makes things up, hallucinations.
Yeah.
Tom, we used to call that something different way back when. But so so that those hallucinated cases and submitting it, so you are violating the model rules of professional responsibility. You are an officer of the court. You are supposed to have candor. And when you sign off on something, you are supposed to be signing off that what you are sending over to the court for review and opposing counsel is true and it's accurate and it's verifiable. And none of that, of the 340, I cannot believe
Yeah.
that we're just copying
I
and
just
pasting.
read another one yesterday. Just
Yeah,
yesterday. I mean, I'm like you. I thought, oh yeah, those first couple of cases,
right.
after a week, everybody will get the word. They'll be
Yes.
cautious. No, no. People are
And
just,
and so the question becomes is, okay, so if it's readily accessible, it's usable, there's no barrier to entry, right? How do we kind of put the brakes a little bit here, right? So it does make you a much more efficient attorney, right? It does create better work product, but there has to be frameworks. There has to be guardrails. So the question becomes then, to your point, which is, okay, well, how does anybody know, right?
yeah.
Well, there are so many, and right after this podcast recording, I'm actually giving a virtual CLE for a law firm on AI use cases,
Yeah.
right? And so, right, so that's the thing. There are so many different use cases in either legal research or in deposition summaries or in contract analysis or presentation drafting, et cetera, that can allow an attorney to do better. But you need to be able to, just like the rules say, the rules of professional responsibility say, if you don't understand the technology under Rule 1.1, Comment 8, that was amended back in 2012, all right? By the way, footnote, I'd love for that language not to be in a comment, but to be in the actual rule. But regardless, I digress. But work with your, let's say, your firm's IT or your firm's litigation support team or your firm's professional development team, et cetera, or a Tom O'Connor or a Daniel Gold or whomever that understands the AI and the prompting techniques for the right context, for the right timekeeper, to be able to generate the right output because it's garbage in, garbage out. And if you remember Ron Popeil, who used to sell the set it and forget it rotisserie oven, prompting is not set it and forget it,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? It is not.
It
It
is
is,
not.
and
Yeah.
and if people, and I said this at Relativity Fest as well. So during an interview at Relativity Fest, and I want to repeat it here because it's so true. If you treat AI like a human, like it is a junior associate at your firm,
Okay.
then you will be able to get better output.
That's a great tip.
Now,
Yeah.
let
Don't
me let
just
me let
blindly accept the output.
don't blindly accept. It's
Yeah.
an iterative
You wouldn't do
process.
that from a junior associate when you ask them to
There it
research
is.
something, right?
There
You,
it
you
is.
take it and look. Yeah. Yeah. Great point. Okay. So listen, I want to be mindful of your time. You got to get on to something else, right?
Well, we still have some time. We can
All
still
right.
jam.
Well, I want to just try to close with the resource thing. If you had a client and they said, "Where do I go to get some training on this? What's the resources?" I know Microsoft has some good technical resources, and if you can wade through
Mm,
the the index to get to the point, they have some pretty dryly written stuff. But
they do.
I don't know that I know of a good source of training on not just the general question of all of this, but even deeper down to what about Purview? What about eDiscovery and M365? Anything you know of that's any good?
Yeah, so I'll go through some free and some paid resources. Okay, so from a free resource perspective, I'd encourage folks to take a look at LinkedIn Learning. I'm not promoting it. I'm not affiliated or associated with it whatsoever. Nor will I be for some of the other things I talk about. But if you go to LinkedIn Learning, for instance, you can be able to find, and
They
it's not
have
going to
some
be
sources there. Okay, good,
right,
good,
and
good,
not
good.
tied specifically to e-discovery, but it's going to tie specifically to understanding, be able to how to be able to leverage Gen AI. Now, interestingly enough, OpenAI, the creators of ChatGPT, again, not affiliated or what have you, but just saying that they offer free courses as well. And I would highly encourage anyone who wants to get a better understanding of how this works, generally speaking. So I'm going to put that into one bucket. The
Isn't
second
it
bucket,
interesting? Because Microsoft owns 60% of OpenAI, right?
they do. Yeah.
You know,
Or if the percentage you probably know better than I, but yeah.
well, I
Yeah.
think that was after they restructured their deal. It was in the news the other day, and I think that's it, 60-ish.
We'll go
You
with
know,
that.
it's
Yeah.
over 50. That's the magic number, right?
As we know well, that's all that matters. So
Yeah,
51
yeah,
is even good enough.
exactly.
Um, so there's kind of bucket number one, right? So general AI, fundamental knowledge. So LinkedIn Learning, OpenAI, those are two very good resources.
Okay.
The second resource or second bucket I'm going to tell everyone about is to go over, if you don't subscribe to it, it's worth subscribing to Practice Law Institute, PLI.
PLI, sure.
Yes. I love going over to PLI. Again, I'm not associated with it or affiliated with it, but I love going to PLI. I learned so much. And they have very specific, obviously legal oriented AI CLEs. Some of them are free, some of them are paid. And I'd highly encourage your listeners to head over to Practicing Law Institute, go over to PLI, and then you could filter out your searches by year,
Yeah,
by practice, et
yeah.
cetera. But the AI use case there is very good. So there's bucket number two is PLI.
Okay.
And then, and obviously, of course, if your local bar association is doing anything, if the ABA is doing something, you don't just delete those things or treat them as spam when you get them in the inbox. Everybody
Yeah,
gets hit them in the inbox.
yeah.
You're ethically required to learn the risks and the benefits, right, of this technology. So do it. Bucket number three, there are people like me out there. There's me, right? But I'm not promoting myself on your program, but there are people
You
like
can feel
me.
for that. That's why I called you.
Well, so being able to create an AI roadmap is really important.
Yeah,
Being able to understand the AI prompting frameworks, the guardrails, the policies, acceptable use, and otherwise, how to be able to create engagement letters for your clients to understand. I've drafted the language for understanding the risks and liabilities associated with the outputs of generative AI. I know popular companies like Relativity and Everlaw within their contracts for AI, they include important information about the risks and liabilities about using the output. And of course, I want to highlight, underscore as much as I can scream from the mountaintops. Even after doing all of that, it's so unbelievably important, Tom, that every single attorney reviews the output,
yeah.
ensures that it is in fact what the AI says it is, or they potentially risk putting themselves at risk of violating the rules of professional responsibility. But yes, I mean that's something that we help our clients with. It is still new and it is still something that is an iterative process as far as learning, but being able to set the framework and the policies and the guardrails around being able to effectively utilize AI for attorneys and for whether it's a legal department or it's a law firm, there's folks like me that's out there.
Part of the problem is you just hit it on the head. I think it's all still very new, which means it's all changing.
Yes.
That's one of the complaints I get from people, or the queries I get from people is, Microsoft said they're changing. This piece of purview is going to be absorbed by Copilot, and then 3 weeks later there'll be another release. Like now, it's not going to do this, but it's going to, there's no single source because it's all changing so much. I bet you it's even worse for the guys at Microsoft.
So look, I mean, there are a lot of various different tools out there. The big players obviously are ChatGPT, it's Copilot, Perplexity, Claude, and there are some other players too that are out there. But look, what Microsoft is doing with respect to Purview, yeah, that is changing, right? And it's hard to keep up with the changes, and some of those changes impact workflows within legal departments today, and the ability to either collect data or to create new cases, et cetera. But let's put that aside for a second. So then there's the Copilot piece of it. So there's different variations, very similar to there's different licensing models within Purview. there's different variations of what you can or cannot include within Copilot. So there are some versions of Copilot that are just, vanilla like ChatGPT, you input and you get
Right.
output.
Right.
But then there are others which are, I'm fortunate enough to have the full version of Copilot where I can actually ask it a question about an email that I sent or somebody else sent to me, however many months ago or whatever, and then review all of my OneDrive files, review the internal SharePoint files, and then amass for me a memorandum in an executive leadership style,
Right.
right? That enables me to be able to answer the question that I'm charged with or the problem that I'm trying to solve for. And then being able to articulate that from Copilot is very, very powerful. Now, some people use Perplexity Enterprise, some people use ChatGPT Enterprise. And I would say to anybody listening to the show, if you're contemplating utilizing some of these for work, ensure that you work with the appropriate personnel within your organization, law firm or law department, to make sure that you are not using the consumer grade version and putting client confidential information in there. Obviously, there's 1.6C of the rules of professional responsibility. You will potentially pierce the attorney-client privilege doctrine if you put client data into the consumer version of it, but the enterprise version is much better and so obviously and much safer, obviously, because it's trained off your own material. So if data is trained off of your own material within Copilot or any other program, you're going to get very, very awesome information. It'll be great for knowledge management. It'll be great for matter knowledge, etc.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. I mean, anything that we use, any technology, don't use the base level, you know,
Correct. You get what you pay for.
off the shelf. Yeah, not that it's bad, but we need to ramp things up to a little bit higher level. And then, as I just said, you know, what it is today may not be what it is in 6 months. You
Which is
know,
why it's so important. And I mean this, right? It's so important, not just for look, if you're a senior level executive or you're a managing partner, you may not keep up to date. And I can appreciate that, right? You may not keep up to date like some of your juniors, right? But like, let's upskill everybody, Tom. It's
yeah,
what we said at the beginning of the program,
yeah,
right? We have to encourage from the top to upskill everybody, right, across the firm. I don't mean to
yep,
say upskill from the bottom, but I'm just saying upskill across the organization
yeah,
and make sure that everybody's keeping current with the most recent trends and knowledge about how to be able to utilize this because the ostrich effect is not the way to
right.
be
Or
effective.
to use Marcus Freeman's analogy, it's the superstar is not the way. Everybody's got
Correct.
to be raised. It's the
Everybody.
culture. The
Yes.
culture has to be at a
Goes right
certain
back to it.
level of performance. And superstars, the guy who can run the 40-yard dash in 3.9 seconds is going to do that. That's
Yeah.
going to come to the top. That's going to happen. That, the person who's a technical savant is going to be able to display those powers. And, the person who's a good writer is going to be able to display her skills as a good writer. That will happen naturally. What you want to make sure is that everybody is at a certain level where we're all performing. He calls it the culture, where the
It
culture is
is.
there, that we're all in the same base level of
Yes.
understanding, so that we can all start at the same point and not
Yes.
leave people behind. Yeah, yeah,
And
that's
and
great.
that is, you said it best right there. Don't leave anybody behind.
Yeah,
But it all goes back to being able to have a culture, to be able to lead in a way that enables everybody to say, hey, look, change is good, right? We can embrace this. We can be able to be empowered by this, but we have to be able to create the culture in which this is okay. Now, on the flip side of this, Tom, on the flip side of this, it goes back to something else as well. While you may have the right culture for this and that you've got everybody educating everybody else, empowering everyone else through knowledge, again, you cannot blindly copy and paste, right?
oh, yeah,
There,
yeah,
there is something that I've talked about on the Gold Standard Leadership Lab podcast as well. There's something called cognitive atrophy, right? What does that mean? So what neuroscientists are looking at, and there's an MIT study about this. If your listeners want to go take a look at it, we can link to it in the podcast. There's an MIT study where they had basically different groups of people go ahead and do an assignment, right? So the first group of people had Google, and they just went ahead and did a Google search, and they wrote the assignment out. The second group just used ChatGPT, And the third group just had manual tools at play, right? When I say manual tools, I mean like think of like going into the law library where there actually used to be physical books.
Right.
And then, so what was interesting was is who finished first, right? Well, the group that had ChatGPT, right? Over 80% of that group could not remember a single argument that they posited within that assignment. Or 80%, they could not remember it. So they were more effective, but they couldn't remember anything. Why? Because when you simply copy and paste things, you're not learning anything. Why do you think that their notebooks and pens are still being sold in stores, right? Not because, the schools say that you should have a notebook and a pen because everyone's probably using laptops, as, my children are all using laptops in school, but there is an actual connection, neuron
Yes.
connection between the brain and the hand when you're writing, which is
When
why
you
they
write
say
something down. Yeah,
when you
it's
write something
triggering
down, you
something
remember.
in that portion of the brain. I've seen Hopkins had a couple of studies on exactly that.
Yes,
There's something about the process of thinking something, writing it down. You're
yes.
not just writing it down, you're reading it as you're writing it down. That's triggering that in the memory. So it's the cut and paste doesn't replicate.
Doesn't,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's interesting, Tom.
And they call that what? Cognitive
Ca-
apathy?
well, it could be that too, but it's atrophy. It's atrophy.
Atrophy.
Yeah,
Okay.
atrophy. Yeah. I had one attorney. Yeah, one attorney called it a cognitive miser, but I like apathy better actually. It's essentially the same thing. It's essentially the same thing.
All right. Well, this has been great. I really appreciate you taking the time. We should come back and revisit some of these things in a month or so and do a deeper dive.
I love it.
I'm sure I'll be reading something that comes into my mailbox from you that'll trigger some more thoughts on me. So
Uh,
keep keep those gold standards coming in.
will
Um,
do. Will do.
and uh, once again, my guest has been Daniel Gold at BDO. And what's the title of the? It's the Gold Standard Leadership. Is the
Yep. Gold Standard Leadership Lab. Yeah.
Go out there and
So
sign up for it, folks. It's well worth reading, and it'll overcome that cognitive atrophy.
thanks so much, Tom.
All right, great talking to you.